The coffee had gone cold 20 minutes ago. Marcus Reid kept his hands wrapped around the mug anyway, not for warmth, but for something solid to hold on to, something real, because the cafe manager standing 3 feet away was telling him he didn't belong here, and after 30 years of hearing those words in boardrooms and racetracks and rooms where his engineering blueprints made millionaires out of people who barely remembered his name, Marcus knew that letting go of small things was how you lost yourself entirely. "Sir, I need you to leave. Now." He looked up slowly. Claire Donovan, mid-30s, pressed white blouse. Name tag catching the overhead lights like a small, sharp warning. Her arms were crossed, her voice tight with the kind of authority people use when they're not quite sure they have it. Around them, the morning crowd pretended not to watch. Laptops glowed. Earbuds stayed firmly in place. A woman in yoga pants pulled her designer purse a little closer to her body. The espresso machine hissed in the background, steam rising like the tension no one wanted to acknowledge. Marcus set the mug down gently on the reclaimed wood table. His hands were stained with motor oil, the kind that doesn't wash out no matter how hard you scrub. His flannel shirt had a tear at the elbow. His jeans were worn thin at the knees. To everyone in this upscale cafe with its Edison bulbs and minimalist decor, Marcus Reid looked like a man who'd wandered in from somewhere he had no business being. "I paid for this coffee," Marcus said quietly. His voice was steady. Calm. The kind of calm that comes from years of making split-second decisions at 200 miles per hour, where panic gets you killed and composure keeps you alive. "I've been sitting here for 40 minutes. Haven't bothered anyone. Just drinking my coffee." Claire's face flushed. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice to a hiss that somehow felt louder than shouting. "You don't belong here. Look at yourself. You're making our customers uncomfortable. This is a place for professionals, and you—" She stopped herself, but the words hung in the air like smoke from an engine fire. "People like you." She didn't say it. She didn't have to. Marcus felt the familiar weight settle in his chest. The same weight he felt the first time he walked into a NASCAR engineering office with his MIT degree and was asked if he was there to clean. The same weight from a night he presented a revolutionary suspension design and watched the room credit it to the white intern who'd formatted his slides. The same weight that had followed him through 3 decades of brilliance wrapped in skin that made people see a threat instead of a talent. He'd learned to carry it, but that didn't make it lighter. Have you ever been judged before you open your mouth? Ever walked into a room and felt 1,000 assumptions land on your shoulders like weights you never asked to carry? Before we go further, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And if you've ever been made to feel like you didn't belong somewhere you had every right to be, hit that like button, because what happens next is for everyone who's ever been counted out before they were counted. The cafe had gone quiet in that performative way places do when something uncomfortable is happening, and everyone wants to watch without being seen watching. A young guy in his 20s, laptop open, craft beer t-shirt, caught Marcus's eye across the room. His hand moved toward his earbud like he might take it out, like he might say something. Then Claire's voice rose again, sharp and certain, and the guy looked back at his screen. Marcus would remember that moment. That almost. "I'm asking you nicely one more time," Claire said, her voice climbing now, loud enough that there was no pretending anymore. "Leave, or I'm calling the police." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studied her face, saw fear there beneath the anger. Fear of what, he wondered? That he'd make a scene? That he'd cost her this job she was clinging to so tightly? Or was it something deeper? The kind of fear that gets taught early and held late. The fear of anyone who doesn't fit the careful picture you build of who belongs and who doesn't. "Ma'am," Marcus said, and his voice was still that same steady calm. "I've been coming to this cafe for 2 weeks straight. I've tipped 20% every single time. Last Thursday, I gave your barista a $50 tip because she told me she was saving for textbooks. You've never said a word to me before." He gestured at his clothes. "Today I came straight from my garage. Didn't go home to change. And suddenly I'm a problem." Claire's hands were shaking now. Around the cafe, phones were coming out, not to call for help, to record. "You're loitering," she said, but her voice cracked on a word. "And you You smell like a garage. This isn't a place for people who... She stopped. Marcus waited. For people who what? He asked softly. The question hung in the air. Claire's mouth opened. Closed. The café held its breath. Then she pulled out her phone. Fine, she said. If you won't leave, the police will remove you. She made the call. Spoken quick, clipped sentences. Yes, there's a man here refusing to leave. He's been harassing customers, making everyone uncomfortable. We need someone here now. Marcus didn't move, didn't argue, just sat there with his hands folded on the table, his cold coffee between them waiting. The cafe began to empty, slowly at first. A couple near the window grabbed their bags, left cash on the table, hurried out with their eyes down. Then a businessman in a suit, phone pressed his ear, briefcase in hand. Then two more. Then three. But some people stayed. The young guy in the craft beer shirt was still there, laptop forgotten, watching with something like guilt written across his face. A mother with her teenage daughter stayed too, the daughter whispering urgently, Mom, this isn't right, while the mother squeezed her hand but said nothing. An older black woman near the counter met Marcus's eyes. She nodded once, a silent acknowledgement that needed no words. She'd been here too. Maybe not today, maybe not in this cafe, but somewhere, sometime. Marcus nodded back. The minutes crawled. The wall clock above the register ticked, loud enough to count. Someone's laptop played a muted notification sound. The espresso machine hissed again. Outside, traffic hummed past the windows with morning sun slanted through, indifferent to the small injustice unfolding in its light. Claire stood near the door, arms crossed, checking her phone every 30 seconds. Marcus could see her hands trembling. Inside his chest, Marcus felt the old familiar trembling too, the kind that didn't show on the surface, the kind he'd learned to keep buried deep, where no one could use it against him. He thought about his daughter's wedding 3 years ago, where the venue security had stopped him at the door and asked if he was catering. He thought about the time his own teammate had asked if he was really the lead engineer or just a diversity hire. He thought about every room he'd had to prove himself in before anyone would listen. He thought about being tired. His jaw tightened, just for a second, just enough that the older black woman at the counter saw it, and her eyes softened with understanding. Then the door chimed. 2 police officers walked in. The older one was white, maybe 55, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of too many years seeing too much. His name tag read Holt. The younger officer was black, early 30s, sharp-eyed and lean, with the careful posture of someone who'd learned to read rooms in a heartbeat. His tag said Pierce. Claire rushed toward them like they were a rescue boat, and she was drowning. Officers! Thank God. This man has been here for over an hour, refusing to leave. He's been harassing customers, making everyone feel unsafe. I've asked him repeatedly. Ma'am. Officer Holt's voice was firm but not unkind. He held up one hand. Slow down. Let's start from the beginning. What exactly did he do? Claire blinked. Her mouth opened, closed. He's just sitting there, but he doesn't belong here. I mean, look at him. She stopped, seemed to realize what she was about to say. Officer Pierce's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He glanced at his partner. Some conversation passed between them, without words. Ma'am, Pierce said carefully, has this individual broken any laws? Threatened anyone? Refused to pay? No, but... Has he raised his voice? Used profanity? Touched anyone, or anything that isn't his? No, but you don't understand. Help me understand, Pierce said. His tone was professional, neutral, but Marcus heard the edge underneath it. What exactly is the problem? Claire's face went red. She pointed at Marcus. He doesn't belong in this cafe. Our customers expect a certain environment, standards, and he's disruptive just by being here. The words landed like stones in still water. Officer Pierce turned slowly to look at Marcus. Really look. His eyes traced the oil-stained hands, the worn flannel, the graying beard. Then they met Marcus's eyes, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, not of identity, but of experience. Sir, Pierce said, walking over. I need to see some identification. Marcus nodded, reached slowly into his jacket pocket. Every movement deliberate, visible, careful in a way that men who looked like him learned to move around police officers. His fingers found a worn leather wallet he'd carried for 15 years. Inside, pressed against his driver's license, was a business card he'd kept as a reminder of what he'd built, what he'd been. He handed both to Officer Pierce. Pierce glanced at the license. His eyes tracked across the name. Marcus Reid. He said it slowly, like he was testing the weight of it. Then his eyes dropped to the business card wedged behind the license. Faded, creased, but still legible. Officer Pierce went very, very still. His eyes widened. Just a fraction. Just enough. He looked up at Marcus, back down at the card. His throat worked as he swallowed. Dan, he said quietly to his partner, you need to see this. Officer Holt walked over. Pierce handed him the business card, without a word. Holt looked down. Read it. His expression changed like a door opening. The card read, Marcus Reid, Senior Engineering Consultant, Reid Automotive Solutions, former lead suspension engineer, Hendrick Motorsports. Holt let out a slow breath that might have been a laugh or might have been disbelief. Mr. Reid, he said, and his whole tone had shifted. Not to deference exactly, but to respect. You're that Marcus Reid? Marcus gave a single nod. I'll be damned, Holt muttered. Claire was watching now, her face pale, her eyes darting between the officers and Marcus like she was trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. Wait, she said. Her voice had gone small. What are you talking about? Who is he? Officer Pierce turned to her. When he spoke, his voice was cold enough to frost glass. This man, he said, each word precise and deliberate, is Marcus Reid. He designed the suspension systems for 3 NASCAR championship-winning cars. He revolutionized how suspension geometry works in stock car racing. His designs are still being used today. He paused. Let it sink in. He's a legend in motorsports engineering. And you just try to have him arrested for drinking coffee. The café went silent. Not the performative quiet from before. Real silence. The kind that comes when everyone collectively holds their breath. Claire's face drained of every drop of color. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her phone slipped from her hand and clattered on the floor. Around them, people were pulling out their phones again. But this time, they weren't just recording. They were searching, Googling, finding articles. Photos of Marcus standing next to race cars with championship trophies. Technical papers with his name in the byline. Interviews where drivers credited his innovations with their wins. One by one, faces changed. Shame bloomed like spilled wine across the cafe. Officer Holt crossed his arms. Ma'am, you're aware that refusing service based on someone's appearance, especially when the individual in question has done nothing wrong, can constitute discrimination? Are you familiar with that? Claire tried to speak. Failed. Tried again. I didn't know. I thought. You thought what? Officer Pierce's voice cut like a blade. That a black man in work clothes couldn't afford a $4 coffee? That he didn't have the right to sit in your cafe? That he was less than human because of how he looked? The barista behind the counter, young, maybe 20 eyes wide, spoke up suddenly. He tipped me $50 last week, she said, her voice shaking. He told me to buy my textbooks. He's been nothing but kind every single time he's come in. Claire's knees seemed to buckle. She grabbed the back of a chair for support. Marcus stood up slowly. Every eye in the cafe tracked to him. You didn't ask who I was, he said. His voice was still quiet, still calm, but now it filled the room. You didn't ask if I needed help. You didn't ask anything. You saw dirt under my fingernails and decided I was worthless. He took a step closer, not threatening, just present. I've spent my life in rooms where people like you made assumptions about me, where I had to prove I belonged over and over, no matter how many degrees I earned, no matter how many championships I won. I had to be twice as good for half the recognition. I learned to live with that. His eyes found hers, held them. But you know what I never learned to accept? The silence, the The people who watch someone get humiliated and say nothing. The ones who know it's wrong, but don't want to make it awkward. The ones who pull their purses closer and tell themselves it's not their problem. He turned to face the room. The young guy in the craft beer shirt looked down at his hands. The businessman who'd stayed was suddenly fascinated by his phone. The mother squeezed her daughter's hand tighter. "Every single one of you saw what was happening," Marcus said, "and most of you did nothing. Some of you left, so you wouldn't have to see it. That's the real problem. Not just her." He gestured at Claire. "All of us. The silence that lets this keep happening." The older black woman at the counter nodded. Her eyes were wet. Officer Pierce stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said to Claire, "we're going to need to speak with your manager. This incident needs to be documented." Claire's hands were shaking so hard, now she could barely hold her phone. She dialed with trembling fingers. Spoke in a voice that kept breaking. "Mr. Foster? It's Claire. There's been an incident. You need to come to the café. Now." 14 minutes later, a man in an expensive suit rushed through the door. Hair perfectly styled. Tie perfectly straight. Face perfectly panicked. He took one look at the scene, at Marcus standing calm and solid, at the two police officers, at Claire crying in the corner, at the phone still recording, and his face went white. "Mr. Reid," he said, and the name came out like a prayer. "I'm David Foster. I own this cafe. I am so sorry. This is completely unacceptable. Claire will be suspended immediately pending a full investigation. Please, let me comp your order. Anything you want. Marcus held up a hand. "I don't want free coffee," he said. "I want you to train your staff. I want you to ask yourself how this happened. I want you to make sure it never happens to anyone else. The teenager with the hoodie, the woman with the accent, the man with the cane. Every person who walks through that door deserves the same respect you'd give someone in a suit." He picked up his mug. Still cold. Still unfinished. "I'm leaving now, not because she told me to, but because I'm done here." He walked toward the door. "Mr. Reid." It was Officer Pierce. Marcus turned. "My father worked pit crew at Daytona in the 90s, Pierce said. His voice was softer now, almost reverent. "He used to talk about your suspension designs like they were magic. Said drivers could feel the difference the second they hit the track. Said your math changed everything." Marcus's expression softened. "Just a little. Just enough. Tell your dad I appreciated every crew that trusted my work," he said. "Crews are the real heroes. I just did the math." He walked out into the morning sun. The door chimed behind him. Final. Quiet. Inside the cafe, the silence broke like a dam. People were arguing now, some defending Claire. How was she supposed to know? Others condemning her. That's the whole point. She shouldn't have needed to know. The owner was on his phone, voice tight with damage control. Officer Holt was taking statements. Officer Pierce stood by the window, watching Marcus disappear down the street, something like respect in his eyes. And Claire Donovan sat in the corner, her career crumbling around her, finally understanding what it felt like to be judged without mercy. But the story doesn't end there. 3 days later, a video appeared online. 9 minutes, 42 seconds, shot from multiple angles. The young guy in the craft beer shirt had recorded everything, then combined it with footage from 2 other customers who'd done the same. It went viral in 6 hours. By the next morning, it had 3 million views. By the end of the week, 20 million. The cafe owner issued a public apology. A long one, detailed, promised mandatory bias training for all employees, partnerships with community organizations, regular audits to ensure inclusive practices. Claire was fired. The story hit local news, then national news, then international. Talking heads debated it on cable news. Social media exploded with takes. People shared their own stories of being judged, dismissed, made invisible because of how they looked. And Marcus Reid? He didn't give interviews, didn't post on social media, didn't capitalize on the attention. He just went back to his garage, back to the work he'd been doing before all of this, designing a low-cost suspension system for amateur racers who couldn't afford the expensive commercial stuff, sharing his knowledge freely, teaching online workshops, mentoring young engineers from backgrounds like his. Because for Marcus, respect was never about recognition. It was about dignity. And dignity doesn't need an audience. 2 months later, a package arrived at his garage. No return address. Inside was a handwritten letter on expensive paper. Mr. Reid, I'm the young man who watched you get humiliated that morning and did nothing. I took my earbuds out halfway, then put them back in. I told myself it wasn't my problem, that someone else would speak up, that I didn't want to make it awkward. I've thought about that moment every day since, about how easy it is to be a coward, how comfortable silence can be. I'm studying engineering now. Changed my major because of you, not because you're famous, because you showed me what quiet strength looks like, what real dignity is. I'm sorry I didn't stand up. I can't take that back. But I can promise you I'll never be silent again. Thank you for the lesson I didn't deserve. Marcus read the letter twice. Then he folded it carefully and tucked it into his workbench drawer, next to the faded business card, next to the championship photos, next to all the reminders of what he'd built. That night, he drafted a response. Simple, short, young brother, courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about what you do after you've been afraid. You saw something wrong. You feel the weight of that. That weight will make you better. Keep studying. Keep building. And when the moment comes again, and it will, you'll know what to do. The world needs engineers who build more than machines. Mister, he mailed it the next morning. And somewhere across town, a young man who'd almost spoken up learned that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about building a different future. Here's the truth nobody wants to hear. We've all been that young guy in the cafe. We've all seen something wrong and stayed quiet because speaking up felt too hard, too awkward, too dangerous. We've all pulled our metaphorical earbuds out halfway, then put them back in. Marcus Reid didn't need the world to know his name to deserve respect. Neither do you. Neither does anyone. Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories that prove dignity isn't earned. It's owed. Every single time. To every single person. And remember, the most powerful engines aren't built in garages. They're built in the human heart. And when they finally fire up, they change everything. What will you do the next time you see someone being judged? Will you be the silence, or will you be the voice? That choice belongs to you.